Bitcoin running through its cycle almost perfectly, 2 to 3 months of banana zone into Q4. I think trading is the last thing you get involved in. 90% of all your portfolio should probably just be in cold storage and sitting there and doing nothing. With a small portion of my stack, I choose to trade because I want to avoid selling down my stack in order to fund my life, and I operate on a Bitcoin standard. I understand that thesis. Property's really been monetized. Prices have gone up at a rate in line with the increase in money supply. Like, houses can't come down mathematically. If they were to come down, the driver of credit creation that keeps the fiat system alive, mortgages and business loans, would collapse. You've got to be able to protect yourself against the big print, and you've also got to be able to protect yourself against this sudden contraction in money supply. The major risk is that it is still inside the fiat system, but keeping a few months of fiat, like 2 or 3 months reserve of fiat, is not bad. You want to be able to avoid selling your Bitcoin stack. AO's here. It's going to put a wrecking ball through everything. You're going to need some sort of other income source. You're going to have to be your own business. The next 3 years are the most important 3 years of everyone's ability to accumulate Bitcoin. I see October, November, December being really, really great months where we could potentially see.
Welcome back to G'day Bitcoin Legends. I'm your host, Sean. Joining us today is Mangosteen from Finance Bro University, a man with 3 degrees in engineering, economics, and finance, 10 years in corporate strategy, finance, and operations. Mangostein has run and been involved in corporate investment programs ranging from 100 million to $1 billion. In this episode, we're going to dive into property, maybe a little bit of trading, but really how you can increase your Bitcoin stack. Mangostein, how are you today, mate?
G'day, Sean. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Such a pleasure. Before we get into the property side of things, you've got a bit of a slide deck and stuff to be able to share. I just noticed Bitcoin's down a little bit today. You know, it's still well above 100,000, 112,762 at the moment. As somebody that follows the charts and, you know, the typical Bitcoin cycle sort of ends about now, what are your thoughts in regards to the markets and where we are? Like, do you even believe in the cycle still? And if you do, like, where are we in the cycle?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, like, I talk on my YouTube about my approach to trading Bitcoin, which has like a very basic 4-step system. So the 4 layers of that thinking start at macro, cycle, level, and momentum. And of course, the macro component looks at the macroeconomic conditions that are either favorable or unfavorable to Bitcoin. And then the cycle, which is that massive sort of that 4-year cycle component of Bitcoin. And when you're trading any commodity, they obviously have their own sort of industry cycles, and Bitcoin has its one, which is sort of dictated by that halvening event, right? And right now I see Bitcoin running through its cycle almost perfectly. It's doing exactly what I would have expected. And right now we have this anticipation of the next sort of 2 to 3 months of banana zone coming into Q4. And, you know, the market has taken a little bit of an opportunity to clear some liquidity out by having a little bit of a dip. And I don't see any reason to like change my thesis yet. You know, I think it's just a standard little liquidity clearing event. And my Mangosteen framework and trading approach entered in at about 110,000 a few days earlier. And so the trade that I'm running on at the moment is back to sort of just still profitable with this dip, so it doesn't worry me at all.
Yeah. But before we get too far into the conversation, everyone, this is not financial advice. Do your own research. I'm never an advocate of trading, especially for new people entering the space. So I think you better just apply stack and chill. And it sounds like you agree. You've been trading in finance markets for quite a while. How do you approach when people are coming into this space and say they want to become interested in trading? How would you sort of maybe like caution them or frame the conversation? Like, you're not just going to turn, like, you're on a journey at the moment to turn 15K into $1 million, and new traders like, I want to be able to do that and stuff, but they're probably going to lose that 15K first as tuition fees.
Yeah, I think trading is it's the last thing you get involved in, right? I think the first thing to do, like, I mean, the journey of Bitcoin is massive, right? And the first thing you've got to do is study and understand Bitcoin, and that's like the biggest challenge. It's the biggest hurdle to understand and truly connect with the true story of Bitcoin, right? And understand the problem that it's solving, right? Which we can go into a little bit later in the podcast. But trading and what I do on my channel is not about like getting rich quick or doing anything crazy. it's about, 90% of all your portfolio should probably just be in cold storage and sitting there and doing nothing. And that's what my portfolio for the most part is doing. It's like just sitting there in cold storage and doing nothing. But with a small portion of my stack, I choose to trade because I want to avoid selling down my stack in order to fund my life. And I want to be able to increase the rate at which I'm stacking without putting in cash flow, right? And maintain that cash flow for lifestyle, especially when you've got family. You want to be able to give your children a lifestyle, and that does cost money, but I still want to be able to stack Bitcoin. And so 90% of everything I do is cold storage Bitcoin. I have, a little bit of interest in MicroStrategy and stuff like that. And then with a very small single digit percentage of my portfolio, I dabble in some trading.
Awesome. And so you're saying you have like MicroStrategy and stuff. That's the Bitcoin treasury companies. Are you trading those as well, or just swing trading more, or buy and hold for the long term?
It's buy and hold on the treasury companies. I see the big risk with the treasury companies is obviously that risk of confiscation, right? Like there's a big honeypot there for the government to go over, right? And so I see them as an investment, and they're long run, but they also have that risk, and that you have to keep that in mind when you're continuing to monitor whether you want to hold that, whether that thesis still holds true. But I think it is an exciting play on using essentially the monetary system against itself to build massive stack and build Bitcoin yield. So I find it great, but it also just has that seize component that you need to keep mindful of.
Yeah. And when I look at it, and I haven't really looked at it too much, like my thing is just Bitcoin and self-custody when you hold your keys. That's pure freedom. That's unconfiscatable wealth when you do it properly. Like you're saying with MicroStrategy or the treasury companies, major honeypot. Same with the Bitcoin ETFs and things like that, with the dollar losing, 9 to 11% a year over the last 5 years, at least here in Australia. I look at that, I'm like, I don't want to play any fiat games, but obviously risk first reward. So do you think they're going to outperform Bitcoin? Like, what's the thesis? Like, why go out on the risk curve when you can just hold Bitcoin in self-custody? Like, why buy the ETFs? Are they a leverage play? And what's the thesis behind that?
I think for me, like, it's all up to personal preference, right? And I am primarily a Bitcoiner, and I understand about, my channel talks about investing and trading on a Bitcoin standard, right? And so everything is measured in terms of performance on your Bitcoin standard. Now, the Bitcoin standard has a high rate of return, but it also offers a lot of aspects of security, right? Like you've got the fact that it can't be confiscated. It's permissionless. It is freedom. It can travel between borders, and anything you do kind of outside of that sits within the system, right? And like you say, it's all fiat games. And I see it as it's just a part of my portfolio. Fundamentally, at the end of the day, if I decide to exit out of MicroStrategy, what am I going to exit out into? It's going to be Bitcoin cold storage, right? Like that is the basis of which all my behavior and activity gets dictated by, right? I'm not trying to stay in the system, but I'm happy to use the system for when it's advantageous to me, right? And MicroStrategy is issuing debt to buy Bitcoin and diluting its share price in order to buy Bitcoin, but increasing its Bitcoin per share, right? And because I'm a Bitcoiner and I operate on a Bitcoin standard, I understand that thesis. I'm okay, sell as many shares as you want, issue as much debt as you want. The Bitcoin will drive up the price. They build more equity onto their balance sheet, and that will drive their ability to issue more debt. And you just get that flywheel, right? Now, the major risk is that it is still inside the fiat system. It is a big honeypot. And if I were a government who was, looking for a bit of recapitalization, then that would be a really, really yummy little honeypot to jump onto, right? And so that's the investment risk. That's the thesis. There's a return over and above that of Bitcoin. You're going to wear more volatility, and you're also going to wear that risk that it's fundamentally inside the system, and it's not your keys, not your coin.
Interesting. I'd like to maybe frame it like this, or ask a question like this. If the Bitcoin treasury companies and stuff, your exposure just went to zero, would you still sleep easy at night? Like, would it worry you? Or you're like,
No, I would never expose myself to the point where I was reliant on MicroStrategy existing as a company, right? Like I've said, 90% of what I do is just cold storage Bitcoin. So everything that I'm doing allows me to sleep easy at night because I know that 90% of my stack is just cold storage Bitcoin.
Cool. Yeah, I like that, and I think that's a good takeaway for most people. If you haven't been here for 4 years, just go as hard as you can, get as much Bitcoin as you possibly can. If you need to take a little bit of risk or whatever, 5 to 10%, but the signal's definitely Bitcoin. I think
Yeah, the signal is
Mangosteen
Bitcoin. Yeah.
backs that up. So talking about signal versus noise, like in Australia, the property housing Ponzi scheme is just absolutely out of control. You know, every weekend we see, like we saw last weekend, this house in Sydney, I think 630 square meters, $10 million gone. And you're like, the place looks like a bucket of crap. It's probably 30, 40 years old. Yes, it is a solid structure. It looked like it was all brick and stuff, but you're like, $10 million, that's crazy. And I bring that up, you know, new entrants into the space aren't looking at places like that for their first house, but the average house price around Australia is already $1 million.
Yeah.
They've brought the minimum deposit down to 5%, which I think is going to push the prices up even more. And I think that's actually going to help people. Yeah. But either way, to get like even a 5 or 10% deposit, a 5% deposit for $1 million property is 50 grand. Most people don't have 50 grand in their savings. So how do you think, I guess, property plays out, and how can Bitcoin maybe come in and start to provide solutions?
Yeah, for sure. I think the simplest way to describe what's happening in the Australian property market is that property's really been monetized. If you look at the Australian and the New Zealand and, you know, really anywhere in the Anglosphere, the property market has gone up between 6 to 8% a year. And when you track that against the increase in money supply over the last 4 to 5 decades, particularly house prices have gone up at a rate in line with the increase in money supply minus the small steady increase in housing supply that has occurred over the last 40 years as well. And there's a really interesting slide that I have, we can share it, which shows that actually on a per capita basis, there's more housing in the Anglosphere, you know, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, you know, UK and America today than there was 50 years ago, 30, 40 years ago, right? So you ask the question, well, why are houses so expensive, right? And, you know, if there is really no supply constraint, and if you look at the numbers, while we build less property today on a per capita basis, the housing stock is still in aggregate or in total increased at a rate that is faster than the population growth, right? So housing's not scarce. There's this narrative that there's a scarce housing or supply will fix the problem is just not true. What the problem is that we expand our money supply at a rate faster than we create houses. And so if we wanted houses to not go up in price, we'd have to expand the supply of houses at a rate of that we expand the money supply. But the reality is that if you grew houses at 7 to 10% a year, everyone would have 10 houses, and you know, you just have so many more houses than you could possibly do with anything. And so it makes no sense. Like, houses can't come down mathematically. If they were to come down, the driver of credit creation that keeps the fiat system alive, mortgages and business loans, would collapse and the actual system wouldn't work. And so the system is reliant, and it's by design that property prices go up. Bitcoin fixes this because it itself is a fixed supply asset, and it allows any creation of money supply to be absorbed into its market cap as well. And so what it does is it allows you to keep pace with the price of property. So that's why Bitcoin is so powerful, right?
Do you think with, say we get the big print, Lawrence Lepard, you know, in his book, he wrote a whole book about it. Highly recommend everyone read the big print. You'll find it on the website. Say they just go hammer for tong, they go crazy. Obviously, house prices are going to go up. Do you think in that situation, if someone was saving in fiat, obviously, like, the house price is getting further and further away from it, makes it harder and harder. But because Bitcoin is so scarce and it's going to suck up more liquidity, they're better to save in Bitcoin to be able to outpace the increase in houses. So that's part one of the question. And then part two is, if they suck all the liquidity out of the market, Bitcoin's going to come down because the houses don't go up as much. Are they going to come down as well? And then what happens, and how do you protect, I guess, the downside of holding an asset that's a little bit more volatile? If you've still got your Bitcoin on an exchange, or you're looking to take your Bitcoin security to the next level, I've partnered with the Bitcoin Way. They offer live help for setting up cold storage, running your own node, keeping your Bitcoin private, planning for the future, using multi-sig, and so much more. They never touch your keys. They will not touch your coins. Instead, they'll show you how to buy and keep them safe. If you want to make your Bitcoin setup safer, you can book a free 30-minute call and have a chat with them. Safety Namoose, the author of the Bitcoin Standard, Natalie Brunel, Preston Pish, and so many more recommend the professional IT cybersecurity team. Couple of outstanding things here. You can see they've been featured in Forbes, Bitcoin Magazine, Bitcoin Prague, Zero Hedge, Simply Bitcoin, the Bitcoin Safety, the Bitcoin Standard podcast with Safety and Moose, Bitcoin News, obviously Gday Bitcoin for a long time. They're the world experts in helping people become self-sovereign. It's not just about protecting your Bitcoin stash. Yes, they will help you do that in a very easy to understand step-by-step process. But from there, they can help you secure your data. They are your personal cybersecurity IT experts. And then step number 3 is getting a second passport, a Plan B residency. The team, very cheap, very affordable for people that are looking to take their sovereignty to the next level. You can find out more about their services. When you first log in to their website as well, they have got a free 3-minute quiz to allow you to check if you are doing your cybersecurity, your setup correctly. I urge everyone to jump onto the bitcoinway.com. I have put a link into the description for everyone. Could not recommend them enough. I've used them personally before I ever partnered with them for the channel, friends and family. They asked me to help them out. I'm like, go to the world experts. That is the Bitcoin way. So reach out to the Bitcoin way today.
Sure. So part 1 to that question is absolutely, owning Bitcoin is going to keep you keeping pace with the price of property. I think the other thing, or the nuance around property and owning property, is that property is subject to inflation itself. The cost of living crisis that we're experiencing is going to get absorbed into the maintenance cost of these houses. While we have, and houses are reliant on human labor to generate rental yield, right? And so the investment property doesn't really make sense because people's ability to earn money now is being impaired by AI, it's being impaired by inflation, and the houses are now getting more and more expensive to maintain as they print more money. And so houses as an investment thesis are really tough to justify these days. In fact, I actually sold my investment property just about 3-4 months ago because I realized that I just wanted to stack more Bitcoin. Part 2 of that, the big print. I think there's obviously the sort of nation state game theory that could play out where the nations decide to print out their money and build a Bitcoin or potentially even gold and Bitcoin treasury first and use the whatever remaining value there is in their money printer to do that. And there's also that whole sucking dollar milkshake theory or sucking liquidity out of the market. And I think that's a really interesting play. If you're in a system that's dying, the central banks, while they may just choose to print the money out and exit, another strategy that they could have is to just draw liquidity out of the market and crash the market and margin call everyone and accumulate assets that way. And I think that's more or less what happened during the Great Depression, right? You look in the 20s and 30s, what happened when there was some faltering in the market and people were over leveraged is the central bank actually contracted money supply and everything crashed all at once, right? And what happened is all these bankers just margin called and collected up all the assets, right? And so you've got to be able to protect yourself against both outcomes. You've got to be able to protect yourself against the big print, and you've also got to be able to protect yourself against this sudden contraction in money supply that the people in power have the ability to do, right? They can play the game either way. To me, keeping a few months of fiat, like 2 or 3 months reserve of fiat, it's not bad. You want to be able to avoid selling your Bitcoin stack, right? And your Bitcoin stack will go down if there's this common reduction in liquidity in the market, right? So a little bit of fiat never hurt. And then there's also just how I choose to approach my trading, where I have an approach that allows me to identify when it's probably best to be on a short side trade of Bitcoin. And then that allows me to wear the downside as well. So for example, most people go through the Bitcoin cycle. They get very, very excited for the 18 months that has passed previously since the halvening. And then they go and hibernate for 12 to 15 months while we go through a bear market, right? Whereas my approach, I get quite excited by a bear market because I get to short trade Bitcoin, settle that in Bitcoin. And because the Bitcoin's price is going down, these trades settle in quite a high quantity of Bitcoin. So what I do on the trading side is actually quite exciting in terms of Bitcoin standard trading and settling in large amounts of Bitcoin, that obviously when the next bull run comes, that Bitcoin becomes very valuable. And so yeah. So it's just a great way to have both sides of the coin. But again, 90% of what I do is just cold storage Bitcoin.
Yeah. And earlier I was sort of asking, where we are now is typically around the end of the cycle. We've sort of got the next 3 or 4 months, you're saying. What do you envision happening if we go into that banana zone? Like, we're already at a $2.25 trillion market cap. It does take a lot of liquidity to push Bitcoin up, and I understand the price is found at the margin, so it's sort of slowly and then suddenly. But what is that catalyst that sends Bitcoin higher? Where are you expecting to see Bitcoin sort of pop on this cycle and then come back down to wild guess, obviously?
Yeah, it is wild guess. I think honestly, I couldn't tell you, we certainly could have peaked at 123K, like it just feels a bit low. It feels a bit sort of unspectacular. And I mean, the last cycle was unspectacular in the sense that we had this second peak, we had that Q4 banana zone, but then obviously expectations of interest rate rises came in just as that was peaking. And I think it really killed that second run on the 2021 bull cycle, right? This time around, what we have is interest rates are already high and are coming down, and they're coming down into this Q4 where, the Fed has just cut their rate, RBA and RBNZ, and the rest are going to follow suit. And so we've got the tailwind of monetary policy on our backs this time, which is good. While I don't expect like massive interest rate cuts, we're not going to go to 0% or anything like that. But, we will get 25 and maybe 50 basis points over the next 2 to 3 months while the sort of cycle plays out. And so we just don't have the headwinds that we had last cycle, which is good.
Yeah. And I can't remember what year was it. Was it 21 or 22 when we went into Christmas and Bitcoin just rallied so hard? It was so amazing. It was so incredible. It was so wild when that happened.
It happened in 2017. We had the crazy Q4 in the end of 2017, right up to December. And then again, the same thing in 2021. We came in and we went up September to December again. And I think that there's a good, if you look at like Rational Root, or you look at like some of these other people that look at the cycle, if that were to play out again, I see October, November, December being really, really great months where we could potentially see price discovery again and maybe we get to 200K. That'd be fantastic. Some people are more bullish than that. I don't really know. I'm just confident that I will be on the right side of the trade. And for the other 90% of my portfolio, it'll just ride it and it'll be fine. The only temptation is do I pay off the rest of the mortgage?
Yeah, which is like that's a hard one within Bitcoin. Do you use the Bitcoin stack that you've accumulated to become totally debt free? You're no longer tied to the system. You've got a little bit more freedom in your life, but you're like, say I was to sell a Bitcoin or half Bitcoin or whatever your mortgage is, for example, and then thinking that Bitcoin's going to be, say, like $1 million in 5 years or something. You're like, so hard, head down, bum up for the next 5 years to be able to do it.
Yeah.
Sort of think about that all the time. We got our mortgage down quite low before Bitcoin, found Bitcoin, and we're like, oh, redraw facility, let's go. Let's make the most of it.
Yeah.
But that was the intention, sort of like the 4 or 5 years preceding me getting to Bitcoin, which was 2019. And it's like, let's just totally pay off the house, become debt free. You only really need enough money for food, rates, insurance, etc. But like, you've removed that biggest cost out of your life to be able to do it. And then you're like, yeah, well, like we could pay it off. Why? Like, how do you think about it? Because it sort of tears you a little bit. You're like, do I not? And obviously we've decided that no, we won't, because it's denominated in fiat, and interest rates are pretty low. So it's like a cheap loan on the future. But what are your thoughts?
I think it's a total personal preference, right? And I think for me right now, where I feel like I think in terms of, there's two things, right? You've got to, at some point you've got to enjoy life. You've got to live life. Like, the problem with Bitcoin is it creates a tremendously high time preference, right? And you become having this very high time preference, but then you just run out of time.
Yeah.
You got to just use the time that you've got. And that's really the story of Bitcoin. People think it's all about time preference, but no, like, Bitcoin is about freedom and living your life. And there's a sort of a secondary point as well to me, where like what I'm doing on my YouTube channel and what I'm doing with my approach to Bitcoin and trading Bitcoin, I feel like, well, if I took that freedom and I had that focus, like maybe I could make that money back. And over a 5-year period, having that freedom to focus and build my Bitcoin wealth with my own approach, potentially it might be Bitcoin maximizing over the long term rather than it being like maybe working is not going to be as efficient as just the focus on what I'm doing outside of work. So you kind of got to balance it. But, Bitcoin isn't about high time preference. It's about freedom. And you've got to sometimes, that freedom means spending time with your family or not having anxiety hanging over your head so that, you are present when you're reading your kid's book or something like that. That's really what's it about,
Yeah, I agree. Something you mentioned earlier, just in passing, was AI. And currently I'm reading The Great Harvest by Adam Livingston.
Yep.
I'm reading it at night. It's a freaking horror book. It's not the best book to be reading right before bed.
Yeah.
At least at the start, he paints this dystopian AI future where humans are going to have really no economic worth because the machines can just do it. They're less emotional. They can process everything, a trillion times quicker. And then some. They never sleep. They never tire. They never ask for a pay rise. It's a cheap description. What we've done in our company is just me using AI has replaced at least 4 other people. So that's for other people that maybe not necessarily out of work, but they're not going to have more work coming in, and this trend's only going to continue, in my opinion. So I don't really think society as a whole has that long to be able to stack sats, to be able to earn a good income. Australia's talking about digital IDs by the end of the year. Once we get those, then I think the next logical step from a government or authoritarian point of view is CBDCs. Once CBDCs come out, then they can link universal basic income, and maybe they're going to have to with AI and people being out of a job. They are proposing for companies that are using AI and laying off people and then using an AI paying that person or that employee a certain amount of wage and stuff. I think there needs to be a really deep conversation because AI, it's not a joke anymore. It's actually here, when we were kids, they're talking about AI and stuff, and we've been waiting, we've been warned about it, and it's like the boy who cried wolf, but then eventually the wolf's rocked up, and that wolf is AI. How do you think about AI and I guess the potential to be able to earn income, to be able to live I don't necessarily believe this, but so often people will be like, what do you do? They'll ask you that when first meeting you to be able to judge who you are as a person. We define people by the contribution that they provide to the workforce, the value, etc. A large part of that is being employed or providing services and stuff. If AI replaces all that, how do you see sort of that transition zone? What happens with humanity? What do they do?
I think AI, you're right, AI is here. The problem we have with our current monetary system, right, is that if you think about it, over the last 100 years, we have substantially improved life in a lot of other aspects, ignoring AI, right? We've gotten considerably more productive, got better at building houses, we got better at building anything, at producing consumer goods. But for some reason, life still takes 40 years of work, right? No matter what, retirement age has stayed at 65. And you know what? Right now, governments are talking about, hey, maybe it should be 70, right? The reason for that is because our monetary system takes a signal they call growth, which is really productivity. And the sovereign takes that wealth and aggregates it back to themselves in the form of money printing, right? So if you think about an economy has a 3% inflation signal. We talk about CPI being 3%, and we talk about the 4% growth that we've experienced over the last 100 years. And the delta between the two is the 7% average increase in money supply. This AI now introduces a massive productivity boost, right? And that's going to appear as that growth/productivity signal. And so instead of having a 4% average annual productivity signal, we're going to have a 20 or 30% productivity signal, right? And the natural inclination of the money system will be to print money to maintain our 2-3% CPI inflation rate that we experience, right? And that will be to keep people employed, right? And the reality is that yes, the human labor is just not as valuable as it once was, right? And so these incomes are going to be impaired. People are going to be working these weird, shittier jobs that kind of don't require a lot of intellect or require, they're just not going to be as productive. They're not going to be able to so like attract productivity towards them and command it in the marketplace so that they can generate real income. And at the same time, assets are just going to go off because the money printing is trying to keep people employed. And that's how it's kind of always been, right? So to me, that's why Bitcoin is more important than ever, right? You've got to be on something that can't be diluted out. And at the same time, you need some sort of secondary income component. To me, I'm trying to generate that secondary income component with Bitcoin trading because I know that the corporate skills that I'm working on and delivering in the workplace right now are getting aggregated up towards like an executive class in businesses, right? So the individual contributor and the middle manager is dying, right? And it's all getting up and aggregated up into the executive, where they will just coordinate AI agents and maybe a little bit of humans, and it will just slowly eat away all the jobs over the next 5 to 10 years, right? So I try and build income through non-debasable means. That's why I don't own property anymore, because the income that property produces is derived from the people that live in it, and the people that live in it aren't going to be able to be generating income over the next 5 to 10 years that's going to improve or generate material purchasing power. So it's better that people just go and live in their own houses, right? So that's kind of my perspective of AI. It's going to put a wrecking ball through everything, in my opinion, and you're going to need some sort of other income source. And I think you're going to more and more need to sort of, own your own means of production. You're going to have to be your own business. I don't think this whole idea of being an employee and being a lifer at a business or at a corporation for 40 years is a thing anymore. You're going to have to be doing your own thing.
Yeah. I think short term, just to give people maybe a little bit of hope, I think if you're like an electrician, you're a plumber, you're doing technical manual work and stuff, I think you've got a longer runway.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
Just because it's so hard, especially a plumber. Like we got the bathroom redone and stuff, just really basic sort of renovations. But when they're putting the sink in and stuff, like laying on your back and going up under to be able to get in there where you can't see what the hell you're looking at, to be able to get the taps or whatever he was doing behind there. That's why he was doing it and I wasn't doing it. I don't think those type of things are going to be replaced, say, within the next 3 to 5 years. I think they have a lot longer to be able to get it. But then we are seeing new home builds and stuff, robots going through, putting all the wiring and stuff, and it's just the electrician at the end that does the connections and connects it to the grid. Or we've seen robots doing concrete footpaths or rendering and things. I think it's coming, but I think the capital investment will give people a little bit of time to be able to do it. We're sort of getting close to top of the hour, Mangosteen. I'm going to put all your links below where people can follow you on X, on YouTube, and follow your journey. I just really want to reiterate to the audience, if you're new to Bitcoin, please just get as much Bitcoin in self-custody as possible. I think you've got about 3 years where you can easily put Bitcoin in self-custody. Maybe it's longer, maybe it's shorter, maybe the worst case scenario never happens. But if you prepare now, you can really change the course of your future. And then if you want to go out in the risk cord and stuff, once you've secured yourself, do it by all means and go out and seek new information, new knowledge sources, etc. But in saying that, whatever you'd like to say, the floor, the stage, it's all yours, Mangosteen.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, look, I completely agree with Sean on that. 90% of everything you should do should just be cold storage Bitcoin. And I think that the next 3 years are the most important 3 years of everyone's ability to accumulate Bitcoin. If you want to have a play around on the risk curve, then obviously you can come check out my channel where we do explore some more risky approaches to Bitcoin and Bitcoin trading. They are fundamentally part of the fiat system. You've got to put your capital onto an exchange, and you've got to work or have it inside the share market, in which case it's part of the game that is dying, and there will be a time to exit. So yeah, that's sort of what I'm exploring on my YouTube channel. So come over and have a check out, and maybe we can generate some extra income on the side.
I love it. And it's funny, I haven't done a podcast like this before, and I was a little bit hesitant, but I've listened to so many of your YouTube videos now and stuff, and the way that you presented and the disclaimers and this isn't for everyone and stuff, there's nothing wrong with learning new information and stuff. And I need to remove my own bias as well. I'm so risk adverse. I am so risk adverse. And that's probably because of the trauma of my childhood and everything like that. I
Yeah.
understand Bitcoin so well. I'm like, this is freedom. I'm just going to stick with that. But
Yeah.
it's nice to be able to expand the conversation, to be able to learn. Like, this has been super valuable to me, Mangosteen. I truly appreciate your time.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Sean. I really appreciate the time as well. Like,
yeah, it's awesome.
Awesome.
For everyone out there, two things. If you want $10 in free Bitcoin, I was just talking to Izzy last night at the Amber app. I was looking for my headphones that I lost at the beach yesterday when I was working. I'd finished the smoking the cigar, and I got like this thing, a laptop tent that I put my laptop in that sort of hides the sun from the screen, because I fried the last laptop from working in the sun. Anyway, I put the headphones in there and I just like closed it. And then I came home and I was like looking for them when I was doing the dishes last night. And I called Izzy on the drive there because I was like, the beach is the last place that I saw him. So we were talking. And I found them, which was cool, which was great. But anyway, with Amber app, if you use code Gday Bitcoin, you get $10 free Bitcoin when you sign up and deposit your first $100 Australian. Link to my website, gdaybitcoin.com. And if you go to the buy page, you can get that there. But you can also download the Bitcoin white paper. And the most important thing that I ask everyone to do is do something nice for yourself today. And then for somebody else out there, have a beautiful day. Be blessed. Peace.